Okay, John Connors, thanks a million for coming into the actors' room. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So first off, tell us, how did you get into acting? Did you always want to be an actor, or how did that happen?
No. Come from where I came from, in Coolock, North Dublin, beside Darndale. And being from the travelling community, saying you want to be an actor is, like saying you want to be an alien living on a different planet. It's that mad. So that thought never even registered in me whatsoever. Yeah. But actually, what people always ask me how I started acting, and for some reason, I never told them the first time I was in touch with acting. I don't know why, I just kind of blanked it.
Right.
I kind of blanked it. And the other day, a friend of mine reminded me, because he was there in the room when it started, and he was like, you need to tell them where it really started.
Yeah, do. Tell us.
Because I always said it was the Abbey was the first brush with acting, and it actually wasn't. I was in a FOSS course when I was 16. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was two Canadian teachers who came in, a man and a woman. Mm-hmm. And they came in, one was French-Canadian, the man was French-Canadian, the other was just normal, regular generic Canadian woman, and they were both acting teachers. So they said there was an actor course starting, and the course I was on was a metalwork course.
Okay.
And you did English or maths as well along with it, whatever. But I hated it. I just did it because it would look cool to the rest of my family. I'm doing metalwork. Yeah. I'm a man. I'm doing manly things. But I had no interest whatsoever. I played ping pong most of the time, to be honest with you. So I ended up saying, yeah, acting, cool, yeah. Like, I always loved films, like, more than loved them, obsessed with them, you know what I mean? Right, I just said, yeah, but I would never, even when they came in, I said, yeah, I didn't think, like, I'd be an actor, just for the crack, get out of the play, get out of this class, you know?
Have to do what you have to
so they asked us to come up upstairs, we went upstairs, and they asked us to do a bit of improvising, and I did a bit of improvising, and I think I was playing a boxer, and my friend was my manager, and I remember just having great crack, and it went on for a few weeks, and it was, it was getting better every week, but still not thinking, let's be an actor, like, you know what I mean? Yeah. It wasn't that. It was just get me out of the metalwork stuff that I hate to do. And after the fourth week, they said they were going to do a little performance piece on the fifth week. I said, oh, lovely. So on the fifth week, my sort of teacher or the head of my class or whatever, he was teaching us metalwork, he wouldn't allow me to go upstairs to the acting class. Oh, no. He had a bit of a weird thing with him, a bit of a power thing, and with him, he was sort of, I think he was bullied as a child, I think, and he had this power thing. He liked having power over people. But he was a lovely fella, but he would put that power into play sometimes. Yeah. And he was getting a bit jealous of the acting because we were starting to like it, me and the other students.
Like, what about my course?
Yeah. So he allowed them to go up, but for some reason he wouldn't allow me to go up. And I was like, why won't you allow me to go up? And he says, no, the sort of principal, the head of the place won't allow you. I said, what? Who, Mary? I said, why wouldn't she allow me? That's silly. I don't know, ask her. And it was just so random, and he went red, and I could always tell a liar. I just was always good at telling a lie. I always had that intuition. I said, can I go up and ask Mary? And he was sort of tongue twisted, and I just walked out and went up and asked her. And I said, why won't you allow me to go up to the acting? She said, what do you mean? I said, Derek said that you won't allow me to go up to the acting. She says, that's the first I heard of it. Why wouldn't I allow you to go up to the acting? I said, exactly. So I went back to Derek. I said, Derek, that's a lie. She said, oh, there must be something confused. Oh, you can go up. So I said, okay. So I went up, and I was in the middle of the class doing a bit of improv, and Derek walks in with Mary. And Mary said, Derek didn't give you permission to go up. I said, he did. He gave me permission after I asked you. And I got really embarrassed. The two of them she kind of a bit shouting at me a bit. Mm-hmm. Now, at the time, I had a really bad temper. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of going through, getting into a bit of mess in her and there, whatever. I had a really bad temper. And I was sort of, especially in that environment, because I was ostracized even in school for being a traveller and put outside always. So, like, the way I reacted to shame of being embarrassed was anger.
Yeah, you had to fight.
Yeah, so I jumped up and I just get the fuck out of the way. You allowed to curse on this?
Well, we'd be.
Yeah, get the fuck out of the way. And he got out of the way, and I ended up breaking the door and broke the glass of the door and went to the next door, broke that, walked downstairs, broke the next door, went downstairs into where I worked, and I think I broke a window or something, just like blank, just lost the head. I was embarrassed, lost the head, quit FOSS over it. And then I never thought about acting again until I was 20, and my brother kind of knew something was going on with me mentally. I was suffering with depression. I gained 2 stone in 2 years, and he reached out to me, which was very unusual for travellers to do. And he said, what's going on? Tell me what's going on in your life. I know stuff is going on. You won't talk about it. Talk to me. And I ended up just like opening up to for about 3 hours, and I was like, I got like 100-ton weight off my chest. I was carrying this around me.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it was great. So, and then he just said to me, look, I know you've been obsessed with film all your life. Why don't you try acting? And at that particular moment when he said it,
clicked.
It just clicked. I said, yeah, why don't I try acting? Because the reason why I'd never registered me because it was such an unusual thing for me to do, or I'd be afraid of what other travellers might have thinking, you know, or settle people getting into it at meeting,
in general, I
yeah,
think.
of course.
Just they're like, this one, think
yeah,
you know,
exactly. But again, I didn't think like as a career. I just thought I'll do it. I literally thought this could be like therapy for me because I wouldn't go to therapy. You know what I mean? That was the thing. And I went, and the first night I went up and I rang up he got his laptop. I rang up the Abbey and I just said, look, I want to do an acting course. She said, have you ever acted before? I said, no, not really. I did a tiny, like a couple of weeks of a workshop one time. She said, well, look, there's an adult for fun class. And I said, well, the friend of mine I was coming from that time, that didn't really appeal to me. So I said, have you anything a bit more kind of intense? And said, there's a scene study, but you need to kind of, everybody who's on it has experience. I said, well, look, I'll work hard. I've the money here, whatever. It's 200 or 300 euros. It was my last 2 or 300 euros. But I gave it for the course, and I went up the first night, and I walked into the room, and I said, what the fuck am I at to do, and why did I come here? And it was the same feeling I remember getting when I was boxing and I was in the ring. And I'd walk to the ring, and it was the nerves were killing me to the point where I wanted to walk away, but I was too ashamed to walk away. And I'd be saying to myself, why are you boxing? Why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you putting yourself through this trauma? And I did well in boxing, but still the nerves killed me. And at the same feeling, sitting down, and everybody introduced herself, and they all did 2 years in the gate, or 3 years in this place and that place. And I said, oh. I said, how do I get out? How do I get out? How do I sneak out? I said, I'm going to go to the toilet. And I was going through my head, I was going to go to the toilet. So they ended up saying, no, look, we're going to do a quick little warm-up. And they did a warm-up, and the warm-up kind of got a bit of nerves out. And we all sit down. I said, I'll hang on for a while and see. And it was an improv session done then where it was a shopkeeper customer, and the shopkeeper, the customer dictated what kind of shop it was, and the shopkeeper had to go along with it. So there was this black Brazilian man, right? He had really kind of poor English, and he was the shopkeeper, right, in the first improv. And I sort of connected with him because of where he was coming from. There was a lad who came in, and he was a really ignorant lad. And he sort of he said it was a protein shop, and the Brazilian had to go along with it. But he was like trying to trick him because he knew he'd poor English, and he was making fun of him. And I thought it was a bit racist. And at the time, I was suffering with depression, and I was full of rage. And rage and depression are just, you know, they're angry brothers. You know what I mean? So I could just click like that. And I remember literally fantasizing about grabbing the customer and throwing him out the window, because it was a second story in the Abbey, and throwing him out the window. I fantasized about it, and I clicked out of it. And I said, I'm going to do something. So the rage gave me a bit of, not confidence, but just like, I don't give a fuck attitude. So when that improv finished, the customer became the shopkeeper, and he looked for a volunteer. So I said, okay, I'll volunteer. And you had to walk out the door and then walk back in. So I walked back out the door, and I came in and I robbed the place. And I grabbed him, and I took off his shoes and his socks, and I slapped him around, and I choked him. And then the teachers were, stop. And I went, oh shit, what did I do? And I walked out, and I walked downstairs, and I was like leaving to go, goodbye, never see you again. I'm at making a show of myself. And the teacher, an Australian teacher, Julie Shearer, I'll never forget her, she came back down after me, and she said, right, come here, don't go. I said, no, look, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I said, don't go. That was mental. But you showed something there. You have something. Let's try to control it. You didn't kill anybody.
So we're good.
I'm sure he'll get over it. Come back in. So I went over, and everybody just kind of was a little, not scared, but they were a little, you know. And edge. Then weeks after weeks, we all became really good friends, and that just gave me the bug. But when I came outside that night after the course, I was walking down Lower Abbey Street, and it was weird. Everybody kept looking at me right in the face. I was like, why is these strangers just looking at me? And I realised smile from cheekbone to cheekbone, and maybe it was weird because I hadn't smiled in about 2 years. This sort of this weird sort of Joker smile, maybe. And I went home, and it was gone. Like, literally, it was like taking a magic pill. Depression was gone, and then I just became obsessed with this. So there's a long rant for you anyway.
That is such an amazing story. And the thing is, I ask people this question all the time. You have been insanely honest, and that. I think people really need that, John.
I think the more honest you are, you have to be really honest with yourself as an actor. I think if you're not, you're fooling yourself, and you just keep building on a fake foundation. Completely. I think you have to be an open book. That's where I come from anyway. I don't know.
Absolutely, and to be honest, that is exactly what acting is. Because I often try and like pin it, you know, when people chatting to people, like, what is it? What is it? And I think you hit the nail on the head completely. It's not really about like making stuff up or not, or lying. It's actually about being truthful and being so unbelievably vulnerable to allow that to happen.
100%. And I mean, but make no mistake about it. Look, a lot of actors, they have these grand sort of ideas of why they do acting or whatever.
Yeah.
I'll be totally honest why I do acting. It's totally selfish reasons. I do it for me.
Yeah.
Like, great if I can do a film where there's great social commentary and politics that I agree with. That's amazing. They're few and far between. But I do it for me, and I do it to express myself, and I try to put the truth into it. And if I don't, I fail, and I've done that, and I've no problem doing that. But you learn all the time,
Yeah.
and the more you grow as a person, you grow as an actor. There's no real distinction for me,
No, absolutely. And I think it's brilliant for people to hear this, because I was the same when I was younger. I wouldn't talk to anybody. I knew I wouldn't talk to anybody. I wouldn't look at anybody in the eye. And it was the only thing that I could do is do the tiny bit of drama. And then eventually, like you, it just clicked and you became you.
Yeah.
Really.
It's great though, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get to express yourself. The thing is, you can use it though. I used it as just a vehicle for therapy then.
Yeah.
And it was good at the start, but then I realised that's not permanent as well.
Yeah.
But what it did was, acting ended up allowing me to expand my mind and become comfortable with talking about who I am and where I come from and how I feel as well in real life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was able to really speak dialogue with people then. So I grew as a person.
Yeah.
So then that's why I'm saying there's no distinction then,
Between the
You just
two.
keep going down that same path.
And the thing that I've noticed is you work a lot with Mark O'Connor. Do you remember the first
Yeah.
time? Stalker would have been the first one. Do you
No,
remember?
King of the Travellers.
Oh, King of the Travellers.
Yeah. King of the Travellers was the first one I did. I heard about open auditions for King of the Travellers, and they were looking for real travellers. So I said, I did about a year and a half of part-time course in the Abbey, so I said, I'll have an advantage here,
Yeah.
So, because I wasn't really confident enough to go for auditions. I went for one, and one of the casting directors asked me, "Where's your accent from?" I said, "I'm a traveller," and he blushed, kind of went red, like as if they got a fright, like maybe first encounter with a traveller, and I wasn't carrying a slash hook or blood around.
They're like, dang.
So I kind of got knocked back a bit, but I heard if they're looking for authentic travel, I said, okay, that's good. But I knew the lad who was playing the lead in the film, and I grew up with him, and we boxed together. John, a sound fella, lovely fella. And I asked John to get me an audition, but somehow he was kind of resistant and he wouldn't help me get an audition. Maybe. But a lovely fella, but really I was trying, but he just wouldn't get me in the door, right? And my cousin, a cousin of mine, she's a girl, April, she's like my sister, I treat her like my sister. And I would have told just me mother and my brothers and a couple of close people, and her, she'd be one of them because she's like my sister, about the acting, because I was kind of afraid of being judged or whatever. And she ended up getting in touch with Michael Collins, who was in King of the Travellers, Michael Collins. So Michael rang me up and said, you're looking for an audition? I said, absolutely. So it's Saturday in Film Base at such a time, blah, 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 blah. And it was 12 o'clock, and I ended up showing up at 10:30. I was that excited. And Mark O'Connor walked in with his wife, Beatrice, and the producer, Cormac Fox. And I knew straight away it was them anyway. And he looked at me, and Amy looked, and I looked at them, and he went upstairs. And I remember looking out the window, and he said it later on, I knew it was you, I knew you were here for that, and I knew there was something there. So I ended up going up, and he was saying, does anybody know what an improv is? And I went, yeah, like I know, because there was just loads of traveller lads who never acted in their life, like anybody, never acted, and they were all nervous. But they were all there looking for a bit of the spotlight or trying to get a few quid or whatever, and who can blame them? And I said, I know what an improv is. Do you want to do an improv with Michael Collins? I said, sure, no problem. And improv was sort of my strength, always has been, because I never got really strong theatre training,
Yeah.
So improv was just sort of natural because I wasn't afraid of it. You know what I mean? I look at it in a way that you can't go wrong,
No,
right?
you can't.
Now, especially in a scenario when something's just getting created. Now, when you have a really tight, structured narrative and you really define your character, you can go wrong if you don't do the work, because then you're just improvising as you know what I mean? So you have to do your work around the character, but in a scenario like that you can't go wrong. So I don't care, you can't go wrong. Even saying nothing is a choice, and improv is just about choice. So we did an improv, and I thought, I'm at the nailing that, and I got that part, I know I did, and I was talking around acting circles, and he told me, if you don't hear back in the first week or two, you're not getting nothing. And about 4 or 5 weeks went by and I got nothing, and I was like, fuck. I said, why? What is it? I started doubting, what is it? Is it the way you look, or what is it,
Yeah.
And then he ended up bringing me Mark O'Connor, and he said, the part you went to audition for doesn't suit you, but I've written a part for you. 7 or 8 scenes, written it with the lead. I said, oh, great, brilliant. Obsessed now, just couldn't sleep.
Right.
So ended up doing about 2 months rehearsals because the majority of the cast were travellers and non-actors.
Okay.
So I did about 2 months of that, and after about the 2 months, the lead got sacked, I got the lead. And John, he was pretty sound about it. He wanted me to have it when he got the sack, because there was a part of the character that he couldn't connect with. It was that rage, and it was that was something I was really familiar with, So I basically got it on that sort of reason, whatever. And after that, then Mark, asked me to come together and we'll mesh a few ideas together. I was writing a play about a man with schizophrenia, because that's my father had schizophrenia, and he committed suicide. And that was sort of, I was wanting to go down and said I'll do a bit of theatre and do something a bit different and fresh. And Mark was asking me about it, and he said he knew this fella was a stalker in Ranelagh. And he was a really interesting character. So we ended up meeting together and we meshed the two ideas together, and we wrote like about 60 pages in one day of a script, and we wrote the whole thing in just a few weeks, and we decided to do it like that as an experiment, to write it in a few weeks and not have it really tight narrative and something experimental and loose, and let's change it up on the day, and let's not try to fund it the typical way. Let's do a funded campaign, and no film was funded like that at the time, but we were the first. Let's do it an experiment from birth right up until it was distributed, because we distributed ourselves even, you know what I mean? And that ended up just being the time in my life, and because of the role that I was playing, I had to sort of educate myself on matters I had the clue about, politically as well, you know, because he was a very political sort of character. And also you did mental illness called erotomania, and I wouldn't have been too familiar with that, but I'd be familiar with just sort of mental health overall. And then homelessness and that sort of problem. The biggest challenge was, how does he feel? How does he feel? He has no one in the world. He has no one in the world, no one to support him. And I couldn't get my head around that, because I came from such a strong, like, my community, it's all about family. And I just couldn't get my head around it. That was sort of the hardest challenge. But I mean, that was kind of when I took a next step up as an actor, and I went, now I'm an actor. You know what I mean?
So you are a method actor then. That is really what you do. That's
I'd be apprehensive about calling myself a method actor.
Okay.
I have a method, all right, and it kind of changes every time. I
your
don't
own
know if it's their method, and I don't think either of the methods. Well, the only real method there is Lee Strasberg's version, because Stella Adler doesn't call her version the method. Which, Meisner doesn't call his version of Robert Lewis or any of them. You know, and Stanislavski, that's not the method either. That's the Stanislavski system. Everybody just calls them all the method. You know what I mean? But I've read all them books, and I've been taught under Hope Brown, who taught someone the Stanislavski system and the method, the Strasberg version, and I loved them. But the stuff that I didn't like it, and stuff that I didn't think is practical, I think a lot of it isn't actually practical. But there's some stuff that is amazing. But I think you just have to find your own way. Just find your own. Actually, to be honest, recently I've been learning a lot more about acting just from psychology, from reading psychology, because essentially that's what the Stanislavski system was based on, really. And every version that's come since then has been heavily influenced by psychology. And I've been looking at this sort of psychology, Gestalt therapy. I work as a drug support worker in the KCCP in Kilbarrack, and I have this boss who is a cognitive scientist, and he's a psychologist. And one day he was telling me about this dude Gestalt. He's a German, right? And a particular type of therapy where you're forced to look into things in your subconscious that you have no idea about, right? But you sort of have to be an open-minded person. And he said, look, do you want to try it? I'm trained in Gestalt therapy. And I said, yeah, of course. And I was like, okay, yeah, I think I'm out there addressing a lot of my problems anyway, and I've analysed myself. You know, so he asked me a question. He asked me who was sitting across from you. He said, say his name. And I said, John. And I don't know why I said it, but it was my father. But I don't know why I said it. I don't think I had daddy issues. I thought I resolved that. You know what I mean? Like,
you thought it was gone.
I was like, I just said John, but I didn't think he was going to ask me who it was then. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you have to. It's an improvised therapy, so he has to be so trained that he's a million different questions to ask you depending on what you say. And I said, okay. He said, what would you say to John? What would you want to say to John right now? Say something to him. And I said, I didn't know. I was lost words, and I was getting emotional straight away because it was straight to the nerve. Because I was thinking, why does he say that? That's not a problem, but it's something that came from the subconscious. And then whatever I said, he said, now take the other seat. Now you're John. What would you say to you?
Oh, God.
And then I was like, oh, shit. That
is insane.
And then I was just bawling my eyes out, and he said, right, that's enough. So then I started reading about this dude Gestalt and his approach to therapy. And I was just saying, this is the method to the core, the good shit of it anyway, you know. So you just have to be open to different things, you know what I mean?
You do, yeah. That's amazing. Because you would then really be the person who teaches yourself, because did you do class as such?
Yeah, well, I did the part-time classes in the Abbey, and they were just practical scene study stuff. And it was great because you just got up and acted. It wasn't about a technique. You just got up and acted, and you got critiqued. And she was sort of a classical sort of style of acting, and she was from Australia. It's not my style at all. And I used to give her pains in the head because I wouldn't project my voice. I wouldn't, have the right posture because I'd be saying it's not real. It's not fucking real. I'm saying, but theatre's not about that. It's about it's about being bigger and being. I said, but no, that's not real. I didn't grow up watching theatre. I didn't grow up inspired by theatre. I grew up watching realism. That's what inspired me. Now I understand there's people out there that go, oh, if you don't do theatre, you're not a real actor. I don't give a fuck what they say. You know what I mean? I'm not saying I wouldn't do theatre, but I prefer film because of the realism. Because I never got it. I went to so many plays, but I never got, very odd time I got inspired by a play. But I can't even count the amount of times I watched the film or a scene where it just blew me away. And I understood something there or learned something there. You know what I mean? So I prefer going down that route, realism,
Tell me though, how did you get involved with Love Hate and meeting Maureen and then getting cast and stuff? How did that come about?
I've been unbelievably lucky. I have no agent. I barely ever audition for anything. I've been unbelievably lucky, and it's just been kind of a snowball of things that have happened to me. So after Stalker, the Stalker and King of Travers premiered in the Galway Film Festival, and both were edited in a really short period of time. And one was on the Friday, the other was on the Saturday. And as I was auditioning, before I got the part of King of Travellers, someone came up to my boxing club and they were looking for tough-looking fellas for Love Hate, right? And I was just there and I was doing acting class, tough-looking fellas, and they were looking for extras. And I said, I wouldn't really be interested in an extra. I said, is there any few lines here or there? And the I forget her name at the time. She was an assistant to Maureen at the time. Really unusual name, so I should remember, but I'm terrible with names. No, forget her name anyway. Her name's gone. But she said there is one character actually, and it hasn't been cast, but there's only a couple. It's like a special extra part. I said, yeah, because I wanted to get on set and see what it's like on a film set before I did the King of the Travers thing. I was rehearsing for King of the Travers. I never got the lead, but I had a small part. But my biggest fear was I was going to show up on set of King of the Travers, see this big crew, and just panic. So I said, get on a set just to see what it's like, soak it in. And that opportunity came up, and she said, okay, there's a couple of lines for one character, and we'll come on the day and we'll see what the crack is. So I went along on the day. And Dave Caffrey, the director of Love Hate, came over to me and he said, right, who's the guy with a couple of lines? And before your man gets ahead, and I said, me. And he said, okay, well, here's a couple of lines. And I said, okay. And I just kind of paused and I was like, and he's like, there was something wrong. I said, they're not great lines. And he said, what? That was it. I know now that I was a cheeky bastard, but I was naive to it then. I was being honest, because I know I'm a traveller, but I come from a working class area, Darndale, the sort of areas that are being portrayed in Love Hate. And to me, I just didn't like these lines. Now, Stuart is an amazing writer, an amazing, world class. And that's why there's never going to be a show as good as Love Hate again on RT or in this country, because we haven't got another writer like him. But those particular lines, I just didn't like them. They weren't punchy, you know. So I switched them around, did a bit of improv. And
do you remember what they were?
Something put a pop on it or something, or put a proper pop on it. Run like fuck. Yeah.
He have a proper pop on it.
Yeah.
Do you know we actually had him in Film Base, and he spoke about you saying those lines, and that there was something about you saying those lines that he knew he had something special in you. I tweeted that out and tagged you in it.
I remember that, yeah. Stuart said something like that to me anyway. A lovely fella he is. No, but there was something similar. I just switched the kind of the wording of it and added in a couple of words because there was something that just didn't sound right. Didn't say well. Maybe I wasn't capable of delivering it. You know what I mean? Sometimes you look at a line and you go, "How can I deliver that line?" You know what I mean? You'd like to change it, and I do that with everything I do now. I try if I get someone open, I will change the shit out of it to suit me, to suit the character. You know. So I ended up changing it. And I seen Stuart then in Galway Film Festival after the second screening, which was King of the Travellers, and he came up to me and I was in a daze and I was like, geez, what am I going to do? This is weird. Everybody's coming up and saying great job and whatever. You don't know if they're telling the truth or not. I didn't really care. I kind of didn't like the praise. It was something weird. I didn't like the praise. Was like every time someone praised me, I was like getting upset. I was like, why did he praise me? I didn't want to, I didn't want to accept it or something. I felt I wasn't worthy of praise. It was a weird because I was still kind of just edgy with stuff anyway. So Stuart said to me, look, I love that bit you did in Love Hate. I said, oh, cool. He said, I'm Stuart Carroll, I'm the writer. I said, oh, how are you, man? How are you? Lovely, nice to meet you. He said, I'd love to bring you back and expand your character a bit. I'm trying to find a way, though. I don't know how to get you in, but I want to get you in. I love the bit you done. There's something about you. I said, yeah, cool, man, whatever. And you just hear, people come up and say this kind of shit all the time, so. Yeah. And I didn't know Stuart from Adam, so. But now I know Stuart's a man of his word. If he says something, that's it. So I said, oh, yeah, cool. Here's my email. Here's my number, grand, whatever. And I didn't think anything of it. I think in November then, That was July. In November, he ended up sending me like a rough sort of little script and ideas for the character and do you want to meet and whatever. It was sort of cool, so I ended up meeting him, and he said, "Look, do we go down? You kind of put on a kind of half Dublin-y travellery accent because I was kind of wasn't sure what to do with it myself at the time. Do we go down the Dublin route or the traveller route?" And I wasn't sure. I said, "I'm not sure because I'm very politically minded and I'm worried about the way me people are portrayed and whatever." So I wasn't really sure. And then I thought maybe it could be an interesting way to show parts of the culture that we haven't seen, that haven't been nailed realistically too, you know. But we kind of kept it just shut down that season. He said, "Just use your own accent. We won't get into the traveller thing." And it was just come in for 3 episodes. And then we ended up going back the year after, and we met up, and he said, "Look, where do you want to go from here? Like, you're at the leaving, you're at the going thing. Do you want to come back?" And honestly, I was hesitant. I wasn't sure. I don't know, you know, because I knew it had to get bigger then. And I wasn't sure because it's like, again, the traveller role, playing the traveller role, and how I play it and the world that I'm in. The way I ended up justifying it was everybody else is settled people and they're all doing even worse things. So I said, we have to get one traveller in there. That's really quality. So we ended up deciding, and I said, yeah. He said, "You want to come back in a smaller way and just tell Fran and get out of there, or do you want to come back in a big way?" And I said, "You know what, let's go back in a big way."
Of course.
I said, because I'll tell you why Patrick wouldn't come back in a small way and just squeal to Fran. He's too much honour for that. He's not a little bitch. You know what I mean? He's not like, you know what I mean? That's not him, you know, and he's not going to squeal even when he gets back straight away. So it's going to take a lot from him to still squeal. Because that's just the way he is. He has honour, you know. And we talked about this for hours and hours and weeks, and Stuart just kept writing away, and it just kept developing, and it just ended up being a fucking brilliant part. I was like wetting myself when I ended up reading the scene. It was episode 4, and I was in the container with Thomas Collins, who's a traveller as well. It's kind of a torture scene, and it was just looking at the dialogue, and it was just the flow to the dialogue was just it was just perfect. It was like Shakespearean, just this flow, and it was beautiful because he just then started to understand the way I spoke, and you know he shaped it around the way I spoke. You know what I mean? So I'd say that was probably the closest got to me as a character. Only for I wouldn't be as nice as Patrick.
You wouldn't be as nice?
No, no, definitely not. I would have played a lot dirtier.
And then you went on and you did Rebellion, I suppose, with the whole 100 Years 1916. What was that like? Going back to a period sort of piece.
That was great. Yeah, no, I heard about Rebellion. I heard about it late because I wasn't. I don't have an agent, and I was not getting an agent until I've no work lined up, and I've had work lined up for the last 3 years. So I said, when I run out, I'll get an agent. So basically, I heard about it, and I said, Jesus Christ, I need to get in this. My great grandfather fought in the 1916 Rising in Rose Distillery, Patrick Ward. And to say I'm proud of that fact is an understatement. So I got in touch with Maureen Hughes, and Maureen Sound, and I helped Maureen a bit with Love Hate with the casting of The Real Travellers and stuff. So she owed me one. And I got in touch with Maureen and I said, "Maureen, what's left in Rebellion? What's left to cast? Let me know. Get me in there. I'll play anything. I wanted to just wear like a uniform or just get a picture. Just just paying homage to my great grandfather. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't care. I wouldn't care about going in and doing a line. I don't care. Like, until you make it, you don't make it. And I haven't met it, so I wouldn't care about what role I play. So she ended up getting back to me and said, there's only a smallish role, like a few scenes, but he is based on a real life fella, and he was the printer of the proclamation. I was deadly, whatever, doesn't matter, I'll do it. Said, well, I'll see what the crack is. So she ended up showing some of my stuff to the director, Aku, and Aku just seen it and said, yep, just cast me on the spot. And I was the only person actually got cast with an audition, and I met him. He was a lovely fella, and I just got on with him straight away. But I tell you, it was only like a few days on it, 4 or 5 days on it, only a small part, but a great experience because that dude is amazing as a director to work with. I went on the set, he's so different. Like, he doesn't block out a scene, and he doesn't rehearse before a scene, which I love. And he loves improv, which I love. The blocking, though, I have to say, caught me a bit off guard, but I love it too. But you're so used to being blocked out. You know, you're so used to the scene being all blocked out. Now, Mark wouldn't be very strict with his blocking, and you'd have all the input as well, like, so that's great. But this dude was not even blocking the scene out. Just walk and meet. And I'm like, what? Okay. And like, Brian Gleason's there, like, saying, yeah, this is it every day. Like, this is what it's like, you know. So I said, okay. So we walked and we met, and we just sort of improvised. I don't even know what happened. And then we did another take, and that was it, 2 or 3 takes, and it was great. It was really freeing, you know, really really brilliant experience, I have to say. Yeah.
And is there any parts that you would love to play?
Ah, jeez, there's loads that I want to play. Like, I mean, but ultimately, you know, what I figured out is, so you talk about versatility, and that's, like, and I hear what they're saying, but a lot of people think versatility is just change your costume, grow a beard, you know what I mean? Like, change your look physically, and even just your voice. And I know they're very important things, and people like Gary Oldman, Daniel Lewis do that amazing. I know they're very important things, but really, actually, what versatility for me is playing different emotions. Being able to play any emotion, that's versatility. James Gandolfini is my idea of versatility. Now, don't get me wrong, I want to do them mad shit and do all, like there's a, you know, a fun side of it, kid side of it. We just want to transform or do a different thing and get a costume, and I'll do all that, no doubt I'll get to that. But real versatility for me is being able to play different emotions even in the same scene. I watched the scene in The Sopranos. My biggest influence ever is James Gandolfini. Brando probably just about second, but James Gandolfini, I went 18 months binging on The Sopranos and repeated it over and over, drinking red wine and eating pasta all day and gaining weight in a depression, but it felt great. It was comfortable. You know what I mean? And I seen that man was able to play 4 or 5 emotions in one scene. And I just look at that man and I'm blown away because he's the perfect combination between internal acting and technical acting. I think for me he's the greatest actor who ever lived because of that. He has that combo together. That's real versatility to me anyway. You know, so that's the barrier I'm looking at, and I'm striving to get there one day. But the thing is, you look at these sort of dudes, you look at him, you look at Brando, you look at fellas like that, and you feel like quitting acting because they're doing it at such a high level, you know. But again, it gives you a bit of inspiration.
Something to kind of hit for.
Of course.
To move for. And you have recently done The Secret Scripture, and that was with Jim Sheridan.
Yeah, that's right.
What was that like?
Stop. This is, look, come on.
There's big
Jim Sheridan.
there.
I grew up
My
with like
God.
some of my favorite films. Jim Sheridan made the best Irish films ever. He made his best Irish director ever. What's he, 6-time Oscar nominee or something? Always wanted to work with Jim Sheridan. I thought that was, and I've belief in myself. I've a belief. I don't go around bragging about it, but I have an inner belief, and I think you have to have that. And no matter what happens to me, I always have that. No matter what, even when I get knocked down, I always have that belief. But I thought, like, I'm going to work with Jim Sheridan one day, definitely in about 10 or 15 years. And I ended up, there was an article in the paper. My uncle brought it to me, mother brought it to me. It was like, Jim Sheridan, there's an article in the paper in the Star where he was saying John Connor's going to make it to Hollywood. I think he's a great presence. He's this, he's that, or whatever. Now listen, we all love a bit of praise and know what we're doing. Don't let any actor hear, I don't want this. It's all bullshit. You try to act all mysterious and you know, everybody loves a little bit of praise every now and again. You need a little bit of praise. We're just human beings. That's the way we're made. Okay? So when I hear Jim Sheridan saying these beautiful things, I was like, brilliant. I'm doing something right. But my family were like, what the fuck? Like, this, it was confirmed. I've made it. I was like, no, listen, I didn't make it to Hollywood yet. I was saying to them, you know. So I was saying, when I get that Jim Sheridan, I'm going to make sure he casts me in his next film, because he can't be saying that shit unless he's going to cast me. And I did this. It was something I did. It was a 170-year tradition that's in the Shelburne Hotel. Wolf Tone started or something, or more longer than that, where they bring all Americans across to invest in the local economy and start businesses. So I was asked, me and Damien Dempsey, a good friend of mine, we were asked to be leaders of a gang, bringing all these business people around. Bono was another leader. Jim Sheridan was another leader. And I was like, what am I leader for this, you know, with these people? But I brought them around, and I was showing them the Traveller side of things. These people never knew about Travellers. I was singing songs. They were loving it. And we went up to Camelum, and we had a big dinner up there. It was great. I was trying to get Jim. I was like, I'm going to get this Jim fella, and I'm going to get him. But I never got to get him, right? But a couple of weeks after, I got a phone call from Frank Moselle, the casting director, and he said to me, look, Jim wants to cast in this film. Oh, I said, amazing, brilliant, thank you. So what's the role? Oh, we don't know yet, we haven't a clue, but he wants to cast you. I'll ring you in a while. I said, all right, cool, thanks. I think he rings me about 2 weeks later. Right, there's this part, IRA Man 2. That's the kind of part I was expecting. So it was like a scene or two, and I said, beautiful. One scene, one line, one look, just on a Jim Sheridan, get on that set. And then I ended up doing a read-through, and he came to me, Jim came over to me, and was like, there's another part there, Joe Brady. I said, yeah, he's a 55-year-old kind of mentally ill, sexually oppressed farmer. He said, yeah, but who cares about the age? I said, I certainly don't anyway. No, he said, we'll make him your age, whatever you are. Well, I said, I'm you know, I think last year I said I'm 25, but I look 35, so it's grand. He said, okay, we'll make him that age. I said, okay. So he said, right, we'll get you on set. So I was meant to be on set for 2 days. I ended up getting like 12 days on set. He just kept calling me, like getting phone calls out of the blue at 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm about to go to my homework, and they're ringing me, the ADs are ringing me, Jim wants to come on set today. Are you able to come on set? Where are you right now? We'll send a taxi right now to get you right now.
Oh my God.
I'm like, what? Oh, okay. And then I'm going on set. There's no lines, there's no nothing. There's just improv. And I love improv anyway, you know.
Like
So it was just like, and then he like the character gets brought. My character was only meant to be in this little town, and the lead, Rooney Mara, who was an amazing actress, and probably most of my scenes were with her, which was amazing. She ends up. She ends up going to a mental hospital in the script. Now, my character doesn't go anywhere near a mental hospital, although he's kind of a bit touched.
Yeah.
And I kind of didn't. I was just figuring the character out as I went along because Jim was making it bigger, not the script. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I ended up going to a mental hospital. And we showed up in Port Rand Mental Hospital. Weird, because that's my father went to that same mental hospital. It was kind of weird. Yeah. And he just said, right, I figured out Joe Brady's now in a mental hospital. He's in the men's side. And he's going to chase that character, Rooney Mara's character. And I look, most of this won't even make the film. Jim chops films up and whatever. It was just a great experience. Yeah. But it was a dream. It was an absolute dream to work with him. So that's one off the bucket list anyway.
Tell me though, have you any tips or tricks or advice for actors coming up through the ranks? Yeah, definitely. Well, what I did was I decided, I made a decision not to look for a yes off anybody. Not to look for a yes off anybody or a green light or a go. Green light, right, yeah. To do it myself. Yeah. So I co-wrote Stalker with Mark. I wrote Gangsters. Mark come on and done a draft on it too. I'm in the middle of writing another script. I'm nearly finished. And I'm writing my own stuff and writing parts that I like and writing about stuff that I like, and I'm making stuff now. I'm not saying you have to do that, but what's stopping a young up and coming actor of just reaching out to a friend who owns a camera and getting another friend to write a short and just shoot shit and do a scene that displays their best attributes as an actor and put that up online and put it out there? What's stopping you from doing that? Or would you prefer to just wait around and go to a million auditions and wait for them to give you the green light to do it? Like, because you can act anywhere, you can do it any way you want. I mean, that'd be the main thing. And in terms of just on a set. Like, I mean, just do every bit of work you can do, because, I mean, why not? Why not do it? It's fun. All that learning is fun. But when you get on set, I mean, the number one thing I learned was don't overthink things. Do not overthink things, because then what you're doing is you're constructing a performance in your mind, and it's going to be a technical performance. And that's nothing. There's no power in that. There's no emotion in that. No one's going to feel nothing. And it's all about feeling at the end of the day. Yeah. Don't overthink things. Go in there and be in the moment. Be in the moment and concentrate on the person in front of you. I mean, that's what I'm learning. I'm learning all the time, constantly learning. I mean, I don't know, whatever that's worth, anyhow. Yeah. And finally, I always leave with this. What has been the best piece of advice you've ever gotten, and who was that from?
Okay, best piece of advice was from Michael Collins. It was on the first day on King of the Travelers on set. And I was a bit nervous, and he knew it, and he walked over to me and he says, take your time. He says, take it one scene at a time and one day at a time, and you'll be okay. That was the best advice I ever got.
John Connors, thank you so much for coming in and chatting to us.
Thank you for having me.
So interesting. I loved it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.